It was a sleepy late November evening, and I had been invited to a birthday dinner at one of the nicest restaurants in town. It was a part of a popular regional chain of high-end restaurants that was built prioritizing a close proximity to the nicest neighborhoods north of Orlando, ones that oftentimes boasted residency of Magic basketball players, former Hollywood celebrities, and ambulance-chasing lawyers who plastered their faces on billboards dotting the East Coast. It was Mary's 81st birthday, and she wanted to celebrate with friends and family. I had become close to Mary, her daughter Lisa, and her son-in-law Tim. Tim and Lisa have 2 children about my age who moved away years ago, and Mary was staying with them for the winter to escape the cold in the north. She splits time between her kids and was admittedly happy to spend her birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's in Florida. She is a funny woman, with the kind of wise perspective that a second-generation American can have, who was raised in New Jersey and lived most of her life in the South, with a husband in the military and 4 kids. She liked me and wanted me around. Her daughter and son-in-law are blue-collar. Neither have college degrees. Tim owns a small but generally prosperous construction business, and Lisa raised her kids until they were old enough to drive and then found some corporate position in HR. They had both went to high school in Orlando and never left, moving to the suburbs in Sanford to raise their kids. It was safer and not as expensive. They liked the area for the most part, but always dreamed of moving closer to the coast. Tim was able to afford the meal at the nice restaurant for the family because he had traded work on the building's facade for gift cards, an arrangement he often made so they could enjoy the finer things life had to offer. I knew Tim and Lisa's kids growing up and reconnected with the family in downtown Sanford once at a street fair. They reminded me of my parents. I sat next to Mary at the dinner, doing my best to act like the price tag of the salad and fish I ordered weren't a bit out of my price range. They and their friends spoke generally about their lives and how work had been going. Eventually, Mary turned to me and said, "Alex, you know I really like your writing, right?" The compliment certainly took me by surprise. I had shown the 3 of them some of my work so they could be familiar with the type of research I do and see how I might one day write about them if they let me spend time with some of them. "Well, yes, thank you, Miss Mary. I really appreciate that." She smiled and nodded. "I have something I want you to do for me," she began, which, admittedly, confused me. I really had no idea what she could want. "Sure, it's your birthday after all," I smiled. "I want you to write to Dr. Phil about Jessica's kids. I can't write the way you do, and I want him to listen to the story. You can tell it well." My heart sank. She was talking about her granddaughter, the oldest of 10 grandkids and daughter of Lisa's older brother. From what I had been told, Jessica had quite a troubled past. Her mother and father were both abusive, divorced when she was young, and neglected to get her treatment for her diagnosed bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. She barely finished high school and immediately had a run-in with hard drugs in one of those sad, run-down towns south of Orlando, but close to Disney. She had what seemed to be a loving extended family, but years of abusing meth and prescription painkillers that weren't prescribed to her made her paranoid and untrusting of just about everyone. Her father, Benjamin, had recently died homeless from cancer caused by decades of smoking, and she apparently had some unresolved issues with him. He had spent his life working at different gas stations, doing the bare minimum and stealing scratch-offs long enough until he got fired. He had 3 different ex-wives and years of child support payments that he would never get the chance to pay off. He also struggled with his mental health. Mary once expressed that she was afraid he had so much trouble in his life due to the way she and her husband raised him. His dad was mean sometimes, but never hit him like he hit the other kids. Benny was so smart growing up and was supposed to go to college. When he turned 18, we did everything we could for him, but he said we smothered him, and he went haywire. Lisa has expressed to me before that her dad was an alcoholic and had no problem hitting his kids to discipline them. Jessica had spent the past 20 years in and out of jail and almost had a total breakdown when her brother committed suicide almost 15 years ago. "That kid always had demons," Tim said to me one day. "He used to do all kinds of shit. One day he called me from the Ocala National Forest asking me to pick him up. He had come off a many days-long acid trip and needed a way to get back home. He actually expected me to drop what I was doing at work and drive the 2 hours one way to get him. I told him he had to stop doing that stuff and find a way back home himself. He never really got straight, though. Eventually, he beat the shit out of some girl down south so bad that she had to get airlifted to the hospital. I think she still has permanent brain damage now or something like that from it, which is crazy because he wasn't even that big. We thought at first it was just a drug overdose that killed him, but now we think it was a suicide. Probably to get away from facing up to those charges he had in front of him. Jessica and her brother were close, and she took his death pretty hard, insisting, even still, that her brother did nothing wrong and the girl he hurt was beaten up by someone else. 13 years ago, Jessica had a kid with someone who was basically a stranger. This started a pattern, and 4 children later, she had finally dug herself into a deep hole enough that Mary, Tim, Lisa, and the rest of their family had no choice but to step in and try to help. They had been delicate with her up until this point, celebrating the births of the new family members and casually suggesting that she get her tubes tied or at the very minimum settle down with one of the fathers to her kids. It was hard for her to maintain any level of stability when she and the kids' dads were heavy drug users and frequently in and out of jail after getting caught with meth or calling the cops on each other for domestic abuse. Clearly the kids had been suffering, but they lived with her mother, Lisa's sister-in-law, Katie, their whole lives. She was described to me plainly as one crazy bitch. Unfortunately, Tim and Lisa had tried to step in years before and adopt the kids when they were first born, but allegedly, Katie testified to the local family courts that Mary, Tim, and Lisa were all abusive alcoholics. The judge believed her, so Jessica and her kids disappeared from everyone's lives, placed in Katie's care. They would disappear until Jessica had another kid and invited everyone into her life again to see the babies, acting like everything was normal. It was a long, painful, and unhealthy cycle. Things had been relatively stable until 2019 when Katie died, which was initially relief to Tim and Lisa, and the kids were placed in Jessica's care full-time. 3 kids and no job ended up being somewhat unmanageable for her, but she did have a guy she was living with who was the father of kid 3 and allegedly the father of kid 4, who she was pregnant with at the time. In February of 2020, she went into labor 3 months premature and went to downtown Orlando to give birth to a child that came out addicted to meth. She called her aunt and uncle, inviting them to see her and asking them to take her 2 oldest kids temporarily while she was in and out of the hospital. Knowing the situation, Tim and Lisa were hesitant but willing to oblige for the good of the children. Let's just say that things got messy when the lockdowns began a month later. It took Jessica many days to give birth to kid 4, and due to the circumstances of the birth, there was a long road to recovery ahead of the baby if it had any chance of survival. She by no means would be able to take care of the 2 oldest. It was out of the question. The pandemic, daily trips to see the baby, and total lack of income made it impossible for her to even consider asking for her kids back. Eventually, Tim and Lisa enrolled them in a school nearby and did their best to raise 2 kids they barely knew during a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic. Let's just say it was tough, Lisa once told me. The biggest problem they faced with the kids was the instability of the situation. They barely had enough to get by during the lockdowns as it was, and Tim was constantly afraid that something would happen which would totally halt his company's ability to work. Thankfully, it hadn't. Also, Jessica's violent and drug-addled past made them nervous. We kept thinking that she'd come around our house one day, tweaked up and asking for her kids back, Tim told me. One day, Jessica got in a fight with her boyfriend and called the cops on him. They arrested him on site without questions. Because of the disturbance, the local county sheriff conducted a welfare check on Tim and Lisa, even though they were counties away. They didn't really like having the cops knocking on their door randomly. Things went well with the police, but it really helped encapsulate the seriousness of the situation. They knew something more long-term had to be done for their protection and for the betterment of the children. I knew them at this point, and to help, I got them in contact with a state congressperson I used to work for. It didn't seem like much and felt wrong intervening in their lives, but there were kids involved. They needed what was best. The congressperson put them in contact with a nonprofit that works directly with the Department of Children and Family, DCF, as well as Child Protective Services, CPS, cases. The children were eventually taken by a nonprofit and entered the foster system. It was painful for Tim and Lisa, but they explained their reasoning clearly to me. The kids needed more than we could provide. We could barely afford them, and though the state will give money to foster parents, they wouldn't give us anything because we were related. Plus, we were afraid for our own safety with Jessica in the picture. As long as she was around, we didn't want to be looking over our shoulders all the time, Lisa told me. Not to mention, Tim elaborated, we tried to get them years ago and the judge wouldn't give them to us. The way I see it, the state broke them, they have to fix them. Kid 1 had some anger management and developmental issues and stayed in the foster home for a night until the family kindly asked that he go somewhere else. It only took him threatening the life out of the foster father once for the family to realize the arrangement probably wouldn't work out. The caseworker took him to a group home meant for kids like him. Kid 2 stayed with that foster family, which was generally spoken about like a good thing, except for the fact that the family was black, which, Mary admitted, bothered her, explaining that it must just be her age that made her weird about it, and that they wouldn't let her read Harry Potter, her favorite book series. Their pastor said it was demonic. "Well, if she's not getting abused, that's good, right?" I said to the family. "Yeah, basically," replied Tim. The youngest two were shopped around to different members of their father's family, who they stayed with for a time, until finally Kid 3 went to live with Kid 2, and Kid 4 went to a young couple who wanted a baby but couldn't conceive. Everyone says Kid 4 is the luckiest of them all. After hearing about each individual situation of each kid, I felt like I was being baited into a sob story. Mainly by Tim's tone, which sounded sort of like when someone says, "Oh, I've got one for you," or "Get this." I allowed them to lead the conversation wherever they wanted, and eventually just plainly asked, "What about their fathers?" They explained that Kid 1's father was a deadbeat who lived in North Carolina now and didn't want to have anything to do with him. At least he didn't, until he found out that he could have full custody of his son without any chance of Jessica taking him back. Kid 1's father was ecstatic and agreed. Up until that point, Jessica had told the oldest two that they had the same dad and that he was dead. Kid 1 was told by the caseworkers that his dad was still alive and that he would, after all, get to go live with him. This changed his whole demeanor for a few days. That is until a week later when his dad got in a car accident and died for real. I can't imagine what that did to Kid 1's trust in the caseworkers or his mother. The story about Kid 2's dad was true. He was dead. He killed himself in prison after getting convicted for maybe pedophilia? As Tim and Lisa understood it, the guy had touched one of his other kids? Maybe? Kid 2 didn't know about her dad or the existence of many half-siblings. The two youngest kids had the same dad, and he was, to no surprise, also a deadbeat, but had a house in town where Jessica lived with her family. The two of them had their problems, but he did tell Tim and Lisa multiple times that he really loved Jessie. One day, when Jessica was up in Orlando with the baby, and before Kid 3 was given to the foster family, he was mowing the lawn in the hot Florida sun. He went to get a drink of water and died from a heart attack in front of Kid 3. I took the bait, and it did not disappoint. The story for every kid's father was pretty tragic. They really had no one. Their grandparents were dead. Who knows about the grandparents on the father's sides? Their fathers were dead, and it was clear that their mother would pretty much never get things together. The four kids were drastically in need of intervention from the state. If our social safety nets, child protective services, and departments of children and family existed for one purpose, this pretty much seemed like it. All that being said, Tim and Lisa hated the way things were going with the state. They explained the complicated arrangement between state agencies like DCF and CPS, the judicial system, and nonprofit organizations that are paid by the government to act as caseworkers and guardians ad litem for children who are in these types of situations. To my understanding, the state makes the laws and handles the legal side of things as they occur between children and their parents or families. Once a child is removed from a home, they are given to one of many nonprofit organizations across the state that employ caseworkers who put the children in contact with foster homes or group homes, which are willing and able to take the kids, sometimes temporarily and other times permanently. These organizations are responsible for overseeing the care of the children until there can be a court date set for a parent or family so they can try and get their kids back from the state. Oftentimes, I was told, the judges are lenient and hate to see mothers separated from their children, even when they are clearly bad for them. It was explained to me that, quote, Jessica is so manipulative. She'll take her meds and get clean a few days before, so she's clear-headed and looks like she's trying to improve her life. The judge pretty much always falls for it. End quote. If the kids are given back, the parents will still sometimes be given orders for classes they need to take, phrased as development plans, or they will have to pass drug tests. Due to the pandemic, Jessica got away with not completing any of her development plans. When the caseworkers would do surprise visits, she would always somehow manage to pass them, like the time they visited and checked to see if there was food in the house. There was, but it belonged to her roommate, and she lied about it to the state for things to look good. Eventually, because the group homes were not meant to be long-term, Kid 1 was given back to his mother. When he was with the group home, his grades improved, he lost some weight because he wasn't eating McDonald's 5 times a week like usual. He made friends and apparently always sounded very happy on the phone. Within 6 weeks of being given back to his mother, he had been expelled from his school, which obviously affected his grades, was picked on often by other kids in the neighborhood, and was arrested multiple times for stealing, swinging shovels at neighbors, and ultimately assaulting police officers when they attempted to scare him straight and put him in the back of a cop car. What respect did he even really have for law enforcement to begin with, though? It took the state over a year to revisit her case, and eventually she lost permanent custody of her kids, for now, only because she failed to take a hair follicle test for drugs. She claimed that she didn't really trust the lab which the state would send her to, paranoid that they would lie about the results. Kid 1 was taken to another group home, but keeps getting arrested and hasn't improved much. I was told that when his grandmother, Katie, had custody, she tried to get him classified as special needs so she would get extra money from the state to raise him. Apparently, he's always been loaded up on medication and given no discipline. When he started to get older and larger than his mom or grandma, he fell victim to Florida's often misused Baker Act, which I'm sure was created with good intentions, but ultimately allows for families to have police declare an individual a danger to themselves or to others. Upon this declaration, the people are committed to psychiatric facilities where they are given medication. I was told firsthand that there was not much psychological therapy involved, and forced to stay there for a minimum of 3 days or until they are no longer a threat to anyone, including themselves. The oldest had been Baker Acted over 5 times before the age of 13, which probably was the cause for his mistrust of law enforcement, besides seeing them arrest his mom and her boyfriends often, and his erratic behavior. Whatever good intention the law was created with seemed to vanish in attempts to help children like these. Kid 2 had been the closest to Tim and Lisa due to her stay at their house during the pandemic. They helped her take Zoom classes, introduced her to Harry Potter, which turned her into an avid reader, and did all they could to correct the issues she faced that resulted from her upbringing. For example, she was 9 when she first went to live with them, and still wet the bed. She did so often. Tim was afraid she was a diabetic due to her poor diet, and bedwetting was a clear giveaway for him. And eventually, instead of asking for help with it, she would hide her soiled clothes, hoping that Aunt Lisa wouldn't get angry, and hit her like her mother used to. Tim and Lisa never hit her. Now, at the age of 12, she has started to face bouts of depression. Her foster father, who Tim and Lisa respect and think have been great to her, have been trying to get her psychiatric help from the state, but by the time they did, things were too little and too late. When the first counselor finally arrived to the foster home over a year after the first request, Kid 2 was asked if she ever thought about harming herself, which she said she did. The counselor immediately called the police, without the knowledge of the foster family, to Baker Act Kid 2. Due to the way the law is handled, the foster family was not allowed to intervene until the police got there. When an officer did show up, he would have the final say over whether or not Kid 2 was a danger to herself. The first responding officer is given the responsibility of this determination, and Tim told me they often don't have any special training for this type of thing. They are the same guys that give tickets for speeding. The foster father told Tim that the police officer who had her committed likely saw a little white girl with a black family and just naturally assumed something wasn't right. Tim and Lisa believed him. At the facility, Kid 2 is given Prozac and melatonin because apparently people who have been taken to sterile facilities and loaded up with medication have a hard time sleeping, and eventually was released long past the minimum 3 days. While there, she roomed with an adult woman and got home with knotted hair, since they aren't allowed to have combs in the facility because they are made from hard plastic, which can be sharpened and used violently. She has now been Baker Acted a total of 3 times. Each trip to the facility seems to be less effective than the one before. Where was the caseworker or guardian ad litem throughout all of this, I asked. Aren't they the ones who are supposed to advocate for the kids to the police and courts? Tim laughed at me. They're nowhere to be found. When she got out of the facility the last time, they called us a bunch. It was only to say that her foster father created an unsuitable environment for her to live in and ask us if we'd take her back. When I asked if he created an unsuitable environment for Kid 3, I got no answer. They just want to place the kids and be done with the whole thing. They don't actually care what happens to them. Her foster father and I think that they only say it's unsuitable because he doesn't want to give her the Prozac they prescribed and instead just wants to get her actual therapy to help her work through her problems. Why would they want to drug up kids? That's how her mom got started down the path she's on. After the third Baker Act, Tim started to think that Kid 2 wasn't actually suicidal and was just craving attention from her mother, hoping that eventually she would call and ask if she's okay. She hadn't yet. All of this has been immensely taxing on the family, particularly for Mary. She once explained to me how she saw herself in the kids. Being a second-generation Eastern European in the North, she didn't have a social safety net besides her family. Her father was the town drunk, and her mother, quote, got taken to the loony bin all the time. Eventually, her grandmother, who didn't speak English, reluctantly agreed to take her. Her grandfather used to beat her because she was a reminder of her parents. I can't give up on these kids because I know what they're going through, she once told me. The same thing happened to me, and if it wasn't for my sister who was 16 years older than me who could eventually afford to raise me, I don't know where I'd be right now. Tim now despises the state's systems. He loves the Republican government that the state of Florida boasts proudly, but hates the way that these types of social welfare systems operate. He associates these issues with the running list of things he hates that the government provides to people like Jessica, who he firmly believes don't deserve it. She abuses her kids and uses hard drugs, and still people like us pay for her cell phone, her health insurance, her food, everything. Meanwhile, I have to wake up at 5 a.m. every day and bust my ass just to get by. It isn't right, said Tim. Though paradoxical, Tim's relationship with the state government makes some sense. On a rhetorical or theoretical level, he believes in what the governor and state legislature are doing. The problems his family is facing, as he sees them, run much deeper than current administrations. Even though the state has been in his party's control for decades, still, it's the institutions themselves which are corrupt and broken. They've existed long before anyone around had any say over them, and the current legislative body has simply inherited an irreparable system. I've long had conversations with he and Lisa about how they could try to enact change. The way that I see it, if the judicial system is filled with lazy or lenient judges and the nonprofits are filled with incompetent or uncaring caseworkers, it seems like the issues they find with the system lie in the bedrock. They must be firmly rooted in the very laws which facilitate and manage these structures. Though things feel irreparable and there has been permanent harm done to the children's well-being, Tim and Lisa's family can still try to make their story heard. I've encouraged them at great length to contact their state congressperson and senator. That's not even a priority, Tim said to me. I just don't know how much it could change, honestly. I don't know why they'd care to speak to us. We aren't special or unique. We spoke to that one guy because you know him. I've wanted to call him back, but he told us Florida was used as a model of what to do right. I can't imagine what all this is like in other states. The situation feels entirely out of their control, as they get jostled between caseworkers and play the waiting game with court dates. Meanwhile, the children, at least the older two, seem to have regressed while being in the system's care. We have a situation where things feel broken, and those who are suffering feel unable to find help from the very people who have the only sort of ability to directly fix the institutions which need fixing. We have a system which exists directly at the order of the government, but operates independently of those who fund the agencies and make the rules. Tim believes that the bureaucratic system in Tallahassee, which has existed since the city's founding, is to blame for what is going on, and that because there are so many moving parts, not even his ideological counterparts in the legislature have what it takes to fix things, at least not fast enough to help the kids that need it right now. What's going to happen when they become adults? Do they even have any options? When I was told about Kid 1's first arrest, which was heartbreaking for Tim and Lisa to tell me about, Lisa finished the story by saying, and he was just telling us about how he wanted to be a lawyer when he grew up. I didn't say anything to her at the time, but looking back, the statement is almost comical. He was born addicted to drugs, raised by an abusive grandmother, and now mother, and has been tossed around by this system. He hasn't had structure, and school is hard enough as it is without any of this. I don't think he ever had a chance of being a lawyer. The optimism and inability to see the situation for what it was intrigued me. I felt compelled at one point to discuss with them how often people in the foster care system become homeless or have lifelong run-ins with the law, but it felt like I'd be pouring gasoline on a fire. The hopelessness felt by the family as a result of coming face to face with a massive institution against which they are powerless is what ultimately culminated and Mary asking for my help. This family is facing an intergenerational dilemma, where their own children, siblings, and parents have suffered from untreated mental illness, drug addiction, alcoholism, poverty, and the misuse and abuse of the law by figures of authority. And now, those who have managed to stay on better paths and make healthier decisions than those closest to them still feel like they are being punished. Mary worked hard, raising her litter of kids, and is rewarded, at the end of her life, with the anxiety felt by someone unsure of what will happen to those most vulnerable in her large family, meanwhile dredging up ancient traumas she experienced in her childhood. Lisa and Tim, though initially trying to be accommodating and generous, have now been pulled into a whirlpool of time, energy, and emotion, constantly asked to right the wrongs they feel others committed, even when Lisa has other siblings who have not been involved at all. Face to face with all this, Mary thought to go to the one person in her whole life that she believed could actually make a difference, Dr. Phil. It hurts me to think of her solution to the situation, but it makes some sense. She knows his influence, and he is a doctor after all. She's seen him work miracles for years by sending bratty kids to the ranch, empowering those captured by drugs to attend rehab, and giving parents tips and tricks to help withstand the onslaught of the slings and arrows they experience when living with unruly kids. I didn't ask her how often Dr. Phil checks up with his former patients on his show, knowing how effective his work really is when the cameras aren't rolling. The parasocial relationship seemed to focus only on the positives. I instead asked what she expected would result from me writing Dr. Phil on her behalf. Well, to start, she said, you don't have to put your name on it. I'll say I wrote it. That way, you don't have to be involved. I don't want you to stake your reputation on something like this. I chuckled. I'm not worried so much about myself, but go on. She looked around for approval from Tim and Lisa, but they were lost in another conversation. I've seen a lot of people on there who aren't even half as bad as Jessica, and the stuff that's going on with her kids. I don't know why he wouldn't want to help. I nodded. I see what you're saying, but what can Dr. Phil do that the state of Florida can't? She looked incredulous. What do you mean? They haven't been able to do anything. At the very least, he could bring attention to all this. Sure, but would you even want him to bring attention to this? There are a lot of people involved here. If the kids are already being made fun of at school and having a rough time, how much worse could this make it? She shook her head in protest. He'd help them. He wouldn't make it worse, and maybe instead of arresting Jessica, he could get her real help. Another blow to my emotions. After everything, she just wanted to get her granddaughter what she thought was the proper help. There was still a chance for redemption. There was still a chance for good. Jessica was not lost. Things could be made right. Mary might have said this optimism stemmed from her Catholic upbringing coming out in practice. I would wager she was just a genuinely good person trying to keep her family together. I had to get Tim and Lisa's opinions. I locked eyes with Tim. What do you guys think about this? He looked at me quizzically. About what? Miss Mary here wants me to write Dr. Phil on behalf of your family to help with Jessica and her kids. His head dropped. Lisa took a deep breath. I thought we talked about this, she said to Mary. We don't need to go to Dr. Phil. He couldn't do anything anyway. The problems Jessica has can't be fixed. She's been given enough chances to prove that. I interrupted. Has she? When was the last time she was in rehab? Like, real rehab? She's never been to a real rehab, but they make her get clean when she's in jail, replied Lisa. Real rehab is too expensive. The state of Florida can't afford that, and DCF or CPS won't pay for it. They just want her to get clean on her own. I felt a surge of confidence, totally forgetting my place. Well, it seems like she hasn't actually tried to go straight. You said she has mental health issues, right? Mixing those with drugs makes it sound like she isn't really in control of her actions very much, at least not like you or me. Maybe at first she was, but now? Who knows? Tim didn't like my perspective. She lost any sort of benefit of the doubt when she brought kids into the world high on drugs and abused them. I nodded, backing off. I didn't imagine any of the kids were planned, and I knew most of their family was pretty firmly pro-life. I can't imagine she felt like she had much of an option. At least, not with the first kid anyway. Well, Dr. Phil could get her into one. He has connections. Then with the kids, he can help them shape up real quick, Mary chimed in, deflecting the tension. I pictured the 4 kids on the show, the oldest picking up a chair and throwing it or something, which would make exciting, profitable television. I immediately saw their faces plastered across the internet, the center point of countless memes and reaction videos on YouTube from guys who made a living off of commentating on things, finding ways to poke fun at a few kids with serious problems, attracting clicks and ultimately revenue to their channels. It felt gross. Yeah, I don't know how much I could do, Miss Mary. I know he's the big doctor on TV and all that, but I'm not sure he does a lot of good all the time. It doesn't matter what he could do, said Tim. Clearly, they've had this conversation before. These nonprofits and caseworkers need to get their shit together, plain and simple. They suck. The judges need to be replaced with people who take these things seriously and know what they're talking about. I felt an impulse to suggest he talk to the congresspeople again, but realized we'd get trapped in a never-ending loop of blame and empty solutions. Propelled by decades of compounded socioeconomic issues, backed into a corner by a dysfunctional bureaucracy, and still looking to make things right, Mary looked to a strongman for help. He was an outsider. He was well known and generally respected. He was charismatic and someone she had known for decades, even if he didn't know her back. I couldn't blame her. She needed help and wanted to request a lifeline from an improbable ally, someone she genuinely believed could fix things. I saw firsthand how people fell prey to strongmen. Thankfully, Dr. Phil wasn't beating the drum across airwaves, offering solutions to the world's problems. He kept his expertise to his TV show, but things made sense. When the problems feel impossible to solve on your own, and like you're given no help by those who are tasked with helping you, you turn to outsiders. You look at people who can fix the problems, who don't have to act within the boundaries set by traditional institutions or trusted systems. Dr. Phil could fix the kids. He had non-traditional means and didn't have to play by the rules. Maybe he would be crass, maybe honest. But maybe he wasn't much like the guys they normally saw on TV, in suits who made false promises every 2 years. Were you having problems? Have you done everything you can to solve them? Well, he could fix them for you. Look away and let him do his job. Don't worry about the means, how parading children on television and airing dirty laundry could have long-term effects on a completely vulnerable family. If publicity is the cost of a solution, pay it. Deal with any problems he may create later. When you get past this one right in front of you, you'll have time. What other options do you have? Faustian bargains be damned. You've already given everything you think you can give away. You've lost time and sleep and tears and so many breaths from discussing this for hours a day. You can't wait. You can't trust that eventually the laws will be changed and judges will turn infallible and caseworkers will get their heads on straight. Little girls want to kill themselves and little boys with dreams of being lawyers are hitting police. This whole time there's been nothing you can do about it. Are you there, Dr. Phil? It's me, Alex. Can you please fix these kids? Can you get their mom off drugs? Can you bring their dads back? Can you give Benny a home? Can you take Mary's mom out of the loony bin? Eventually, I did my best to steer the conversation away from this. It was tough, though. All roads lead back to this massive elephant sitting at the dinner table with us. Soon enough, the meal arrived. The fish was fantastic, totally worth the money. After singing happy birthday and exchanging gifts, I found a reason to excuse myself early and get home, relieved that the problems didn't come home with me. I'm Alex Lowy, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my poppy wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.